It is a regulatory challenge.
There's no doubt that these technologies are going to present certain questions of first impression, but we also need to make sure the market knows that there is no exemption for AI. The existing laws entirely apply.
A conversation with the chair of the FTC. That's next on Marketplace in just a moment at 6:30. More All Things Considered at 7 p.m. tonight. 60 degrees, partly sunny right now in New York City. You're listening to WNYC, 6:30.
WNYC supporters include Liberty Science Center. On May 4th, astronomer Brian Metzger presents the Space Talk, a gold mine in gravitational waves at 7 p.m. under the Science Center's 90-foot immersive planetarium dome. Tickets at lsc.org.
If you believe democracy requires a free press, your station is WNYC, 93.9 FM and AM 820, NPR News and the New York Conversation.
Marketplace is supported by vBrick. vBrick unlocks the power of video for customers' business processes. vbrick.com/marketplace to learn more.
Okay, so here's a new one. A bank that is too big to be too big to fail. What do you think? From American Public Media, this is Marketplace.
Marketplace is supported by Progressive Insurance. Customers can simplify their insurance needs and protect what's important by bundling home and auto. Learn more about bundling at Progressive.com. And by Amazon Business, helping provide a smarter, easier way to get the supplies businesses need to thrive. Amazon Business, your partner for smart business buying. And by SlashNext, generative human AI security that stops business email compromise and mobile phishing scams. Businesses can compare SlashNext with their current solutions for 30 days at slashnext.com.
In Los Angeles, I'm Kai Ryssdal. It is Monday today, the first day of May. Good as always to have you along, everybody. We begin today with a few salient facts about the company at the center of the big business and economic story of this Monday. J.P. Morgan Chase is the biggest bank in the country. It's got $3.6 trillion in total assets. It has 16% of all bank deposits in this economy, 16.1%, actually. It is, as you'll hear elsewhere on public radio this week, I believe, about to open a new multi-billion-dollar headquarters building in Manhattan. And yet, in the wee small hours of this morning, as you have surely heard by now, and at the behest of federal regulators, Jamie Dimon's bank finalized its deal to buy First Republic, thus stabilizing things and in the process getting bigger, but not, as Marketplace's Sabri Benishore reports, to get us going without some pot sweeteners.
J.P. Morgan Chase CEO Jamie Dimon said the deal to rescue First Republic only modestly benefits his bank.
They are booking a $2.6 billion gain up front.
David Chiaverini is a managing director at Wedbush Securities.
And then they are going to be generating $500 million incremental earnings annually going forward.
The bank also gets a bunch of new affluent customers, says Tiffany Montez, a principal analyst at Insider Intelligence.
It's a quick way for JP Morgan Chase to increase their market share.
On the downside, restructuring will cost JP Morgan Chase about $2 billion, the bank says. It'll also have to repay $25 billion to other banks that tried to keep First Republic afloat. So for all that, the bank got a deal sweetener. The FDIC agreed to shoulder the bulk of any losses from certain mortgages and commercial loans that would come along with First Republic.
I think it was extremely important to do that.
David George is senior bank analyst with Baird. He says many of the loans JP Morgan Chase would acquire do not offer attractive returns.
Well below market rates.
Having the FDIC share the burden of losses makes the below-market returns more palatable. Patricia McCoy, professor of law at Boston College Law School, says there may be bigger concerns with the loans themselves. Take commercial loans.
There is a lot of talk on the street that commercial loans to finance office space in the future may go into default because there's so many office vacancies.
McCoy also says a lot of the residential mortgages JP Morgan Chase would take on are interest-only mortgages, where payments suddenly jump after a few years.
They have a much higher default rate than ordinary fixed-rate mortgages
If those concerns pan out, having the FDIC shoulder some of that risk would offer a lot of protection. In New York, I'm Sabri Benishore for Marketplace.
All right, let's work our way down the banking size chart for a bit, because the last time we, and by we, I mean the banking system, found ourselves here almost 2 months ago now, there was a whole lot of justified concern about what the whole thing would mean for smaller banks. Depositors pulled more than $100 billion out of small banks in the week after SVB collapsed, and no small chunk of that money went to bigger banks on the theory that with size comes safety. So, what do you suppose is in the wind this go-round? Marketplace's Kimberly Adams made some calls.
Many of what we call small banks aren't really all that small. Even once you get below the nation's top 25 banks, smaller ones can still have billions of dollars in deposits. But among the truly small local banks, the vibe today was no big deal. Ann Balser is with the Independent Community Bankers Association of America.
One of the phrases that I saw trending on Twitter for our community banks was another normal day on Main Street.
Reaction at the local level, in most places, was pretty muted. Mark Mangano is president and CEO of the West Virginia Bankers Association.
I think the initial shock came 7 weeks ago, and I don't anticipate that this is going to create any great heartburn for the West Virginia banking industry.
Part of the chill reaction is that banks have spent the last month reassuring their customers. William Chittenden teaches finance at Texas State University.
They were reaching out to those customers saying, look, we're not an SVB. We're not a Signature. And my guess today, they're having those same types of calls of, we're not First Republic. And here's why we're different.
Messaging to customers that they are more diversified and risk-averse than the banks in the headlines. Rose Oswald-Poles is the president and CEO of the Wisconsin Bankers Association. She says they did see some deposit outflows back when SVB collapsed, but only like 1 or 2%.
And a lot of those deposits have actually come back to our member banks.
Banks that are out there again today, telling customers that despite the bank failures on Wall Street, the banks at home are fine. In Washington, I'm Kimberly Adams for Marketplace.
JP Morgan shares up almost 3% today. The KBW Regional Bank Index went the other way, down about 2.5%. The major indices down as well, not all that much though. Really, we'll have the details when we do the numbers. We made the rounds in Washington, D.C. last week. Secretary Raimondo at Commerce, National Economic Council Director Lael Brainerd at the White House. Also, Lina Khan, the chair of the Federal Trade Commission. She's been in the job since the middle of 2021, and she's been pretty busy taking on non-compete clauses and tech company mergers, among other things. But we started, she and I, with the very, very basics. What, for instance, does the FTC do?
We are charged with enforcing the nation's antitrust laws as well as the nation's consumer protection laws. The FTC was actually created more than a century ago in the era of the robber barons and the industrial trusts and Standard Oil to really take on concentrated economic power and the monopolies that Congress worried were squeezing small business and hurting consumers.
Do you think that applies today in your running of the FTC, that last little bit that you said there?
Absolutely. Look, it's no secret that today across our economy, we see markets that are dominated by a very small number of companies. And so it is especially critical that we're vigorously enforcing the antitrust and anti-monopoly laws.
Is it fair to characterize the Lina Khan FTC as more robust than it's been in the past?
Look, I'll leave those types of assessments to observers. But
Well, I want your observation. You're running this place. You get to decide.
We're definitely looking to ensure that we are fully activating all of our legal authorities and bringing them to bear where needed. I worry that there has been a perception in the market that businesses can sometimes get a free pass if they're too big. And we're wanting to make sure that the law applies equally. And that sometimes includes taking on some of the biggest, most powerful companies in our economy. That really is in the DNA of the FTC when you have an agency that's charged with taking on the trusts and the robber barons and the monopolies that inevitably is going to pit you up against these firms.
You said, and it stuck with me because I'm not familiar with this word. You like to go after cases in their incipiency before they really become damaging or harmful to consumers or small businesses. Explain that a little bit.
That's exactly right. And that's not just my preference, it's Congress's preference. So in the statute that Congress charged us with enforcing, lawmakers emphasized that we need to be looking at monopolistic threats in their incipiency, with the idea being that it's much easier to address concentrations of power in the earlier stages rather than later when you have these fully fledged monopolies that have captured all these markets, and it can become much more difficult to remedy.
I want to talk about a couple of sort of larger issues in this economy. Consumer privacy is one. Obviously, that is an area of concern to you and to this entire building. The case at hand is Twitter. I don't want to talk about Twitter. What I do want to talk about, though, is Scott McNealy and Sun Microsystems many years ago, as you know, since you're smiling, said you got no privacy, get over it. I wonder if you're trying to shut the barn door after the horse is gone.
Look, it's certainly a valid concern. The FTC Act prohibits unfair or deceptive practices, and Congress didn't create a closed list or say that only applies to some technologies and not others. It really applies across the board, and that's why the FTC has now for many years been the frontline enforcer of strong privacy laws. We have taken several actions just in the last few months that have been making sure we're protecting people's sensitive information, be it geolocation data that people can buy to track with great precision whether people are going to addiction facilities or places of worship or seeking reproductive health service. So we take that job extremely seriously, and especially as more and more parts of the economy digitize, making sure we're fully protecting people's data is critical.
On that last point, how much of your time is spent on technology and the digital economy? I imagine it's way up there in percentage.
It's an interesting question because more and more of our economy is becoming digitized. So increasingly, there isn't really a clean distinction between digital and non-digital. If we have, say, a merger of grocery stores, oftentimes that will have a digital component. Tractors, farming equipment, more and more equipment is becoming digitized in ways that the insights that we've developed in the context of social media or e-commerce are now having to be applied across the board.
There's an area of this economy that is, for you, going to be, I think, a case of, what is it the lawyers say? A case of first impression, right? Technology, you kind of got handed, and Twitter, you got handed, and railroad competition, and whatever else it is that you've been dealing with at this commission for 100 and something years, landed on your desk when you got here. Artificial intelligence is new for you, and you're starting in this organization, in this building, to start talking about it and thinking about it. And I wondered broadly how you're thinking about artificial intelligence and how it ought to be regulated. And if you're the person to do it, or you're the organization, not just you.
So it's important when we're talking about AI to drill down a little bit more specifically about what we mean, right? Oftentimes what we're talking about is automated decision making, automated decision processes, as well as huge amounts of data that is being fed into these systems. The FTC has already been taking on instances in which some of these automated decision tools are being used in unfair ways or discriminatory ways. There's no doubt that these technologies are going to present certain questions of first impression, but we also need to make sure the market knows that there is no exemption for AI. The existing laws entirely apply, and so we've been putting out notices alerting the market to the fact that these tools can be used to turbocharge fraud and scams, right? These tools can be used to create fake reviews, phishing attempts, all types of fraud can really be now engaged in much more cheaply, much more quickly, and on a much larger scale. And so companies that are creating these tools need to be on notice that if you're creating technologies that are effectively designed to deceive people, you can be on the hook even under the existing laws.
Do you think a bureaucracy as large as the FTC and the federal government, for that matter, can move fast enough?
Look, the FTC is small. We're somewhere around 1,200 people. We are nimble. We're agile. There's no doubt that there are huge asymmetries of resources between us and big business, huge asymmetries of information between us and big business. But we are committed to using all of the tools that we have.
About your size, you were up on Capitol Hill the other day, I think, for a budget hearing. There were some complaints from Republicans in Congress about what the FTC is doing, and it seems challenging that you're going to get more money
to do what you want to do. I wonder how concerned you are about backlash against the robust Lina Khan FTC that you envision.
So we were really thrilled to actually have gotten an increase in our budget this past year. We're going to be hiring up with that new money.
It's new days in Congress now, as you know.
Look, I think a lot about the risks of under-enforcing, right? I mean, the harms that we're talking about are not abstract. These are serious problems that Americans are facing day in, day out, be it in the context of people facing shortages of infant formula, people, being squeezed and not being able to afford essential medicines. So these are very real problems, and we are addressing them with enormous urgency and feel that there's a big cost to under-enforcing and not using our tools.
You are not only in charge of consumer welfare in this economy, you are a consumer in this economy. I wonder what you think about if you buy something off Amazon or you search on Google.
I'm trying to be careful about how I answer this one since it's specific companies.
I understand. Well, let's broaden it to when you order something online or search the internet. This is you, Lina Khan, going out and trying to find, I don't know, maybe you're Yelping a new restaurant for lunch.
One of the key initiatives that we have underway is addressing what we call dark patterns. And so this relates to the ways in which companies online will use deceptive and manipulative design tactics to nudge you in one direction or another, make it more difficult to cancel something, make it easier to inadvertently make a purchase. And so I think those are aspects of the online economy that everybody can relate to. I've certainly been able to relate to. And so making sure that we are, in the first instance, understanding how companies are using these dark patterns and then addressing them where they may be illegal is really important.
Do you think about it, though?
Think about what?
That stuff when you're looking for a new restaurant on Yelp or whatever?
I mean, look, the online economy has become essential to how all of us are increasingly navigating day-to-day life. And so ensuring that clear rules of fair competition and consumer protection apply in the online economy is really important.
Lina Khan, thanks for your time.
Thanks for having me.
Coming up,
they're wildly different from one another,
just like snowflakes. But first, let's do the numbers. Dow Industrials off 46 points today, a bit more than 0.1%, 34,051. The Nasdaq gave up 13 points, a 0.1% there as well. Closed at 12,212. That's a lot of twos and ones to read out loud. The S&P 500 basically flat, 41,67. More cuts at General Motors over the weekend. The automaker let several hundred contract workers go from an engineering center near Detroit. Back in February, you might remember, GM cut hundreds of executive level and salary jobs, and in April said about 5,000 salaried workers had taken buyouts. GM revved up about 1.33%. Today, Ford up about 1.5%. You're listening to Marketplace.
Marketplace is supported by McDermott, Will & Emery, an international law firm helping clients make progress toward their goals by turning big ideas into actionable plans. Learn how McDermott makes the process as satisfying as the end result at MWE.com. And by Amazon Business. From small business to big enterprise and everything in between, Amazon Business helps simplify the supplies buying process. Amazon Business, your partner for smart business buying. And by Domo, the data experience platform innovator that unites IT's need for governance and business users' need for access. With Domo, companies get agile data experiences that spark the curiosity that underpins business impact. More at domo.com.
Support for WNYC comes from Bank of America, offering access to resources and digital tools designed to help local to global companies make moves for their businesses. Learn more at bankofamerica.com/banking for business.
On the next All of It, W. Kamau Bell's latest documentary is called 1000% Me, Growing Up Mixed. It's both an investigation into the challenges multiracial families face and a celebration of their existence. And it demonstrates that when it comes to talking about race, kids have no trouble having complex conversations. And we'll talk about the Tony Award nominations with Time Out's theater critic. I'm Allison Stewart. Join me for All of It, weekdays at noon on WNYC.
You're listening to Marketplace on WNYC. In the 7 o'clock hour of All Things Considered, thousands of people are fleeing violence in Sudan and crossing the Red Sea on naval ships to Saudi Arabia, where they're telling their stories and worried about those left behind. We'll have that and much more at 7 o'clock. Stay with us.
This is Marketplace. I'm Kai Ryssdal. The Commerce Department told us this morning that construction in this economy is still doing just fine. Construction spending in March was up 3.8% from a year earlier, driven mostly by an increase in commercial building. 2 points to bear in mind with that data point. Number one, it's good news for construction workers who are still in short supply and so are able to get better pay. Two, though, construction is really interest rate sensitive, and growth there means the Fed's job on inflation is just getting that much harder. Marketplace's Savannah Marr is on that one.
Commercial builders like O'Neill Construction Group in Portland, Oregon, have been totally booked lately.
Everything from doing work at the airport to light rail to multifamily housing units.
That's the company's president, Maurice Rahming.
Business has been extremely busy.
So busy, in fact.
We are definitely having to say no at times.
It's companies like Rahming's that are fueling this boom in construction spending, namely commercial and industrial building firms, says Chad Moutre, chief economist with the National Association of Manufacturers.
This data is largely picking up as a proxy for reshoring and nearshoring in the U.S.
He's talking about all those dollars the Biden administration recently dedicated to semiconductor chip manufacturing and battery production. Those warehouses and factories need to be built, and that's one reason construction firms are busy these days. But those firms are still paying a premium for labor, says Anirban Basu, chief economist at Associated Builders and Contractors.
The construction worker is becoming more expensive faster than in other segments, and that's because they're in such short supply and in such high demand.
And higher labor costs drive up the overall cost of construction.
It makes the fight on inflation that much more challenging.
Typically, Basu says the construction workforce is one of the first to suffer amid higher borrowing costs. But for now, that sector isn't showing any signs of slowing. I'm Savannah Marr for Marketplace.
I don't know if you saw this, but Saturday a week ago was Record Store Day. Yes, a marketing ploy by independent record stores all over the world, but they are onto something because last year consumers bought more new vinyl than they did CDs for the first time since 1987. That's according to the Recording Industry Association of America. LPs are booming, but as Marketplace's Henry Epp reports, it has been a bumpy ride.
The Burlington Record Plant sits in a narrow industrial building behind a bagel shop in Burlington, Vermont. Inside, a machine that dates back to the 1960s is pressing vinyl discs, etched with the music of a local soul folk trio, about one record every minute or so. Owner Justin Crowther has been operating this small shop since 2014.
Truthfully, I'm a boutique pressing plant.
Since the vinyl boom started, Crowther says he's turned down investment offers and orders from major record labels. That makes him something of an outlier, as sales of LPs and the number of plants making them have exploded.
It's great for the business. I just hope that it's not too much too fast.
The vinyl resurgence really started in the mid-2000s.
Josh Friedlander is with the Recording Industry Association of America.
2005, I think, was the year that vinyl sales were actually at their lowest in the U.S.
They've climbed ever since, driven first by indie labels and small record stores. Then, in the last few years, Adele, Taylor Swift, and other major artists joined in, and Target, Walmart, and Best Buy started selling reissues of classic albums. Between 2020 and 2021, vinyl revenues jumped by over $450 million, according to the RIAA. But vinyl's success is relative, Friedlander says. The music industry really makes money streaming.
There are trillions of streams, and 80+% of the revenue is still coming from streaming.
Still, over the course of the pandemic, vinyl managed to carve out an 8% slice of industry revenues. But getting there wasn't easy for pressing plants. Jen DiEugenio is the founder and president of the industry group Women in Vinyl.
For the industry, it was just like one hit after another, honestly, because we started the year before the pandemic with the Apollo lacquer fire.
In February 2020, that fire destroyed the only plant in the U.S. that made a crucial component in the record-making process. Then the pandemic caused a vinyl shortage.
When everybody started to renovate at home and use, vinyl flooring and things like that because they couldn't go anywhere, we couldn't get the PVC that we needed to actually press records.
Most of those issues have eased, says Dustin Blocker, the owner of Hand Drawn Pressing in Dallas, Texas, and the president of the Vinyl Record Manufacturers Association. New record pressing plants have opened, and others expanded, including his.
We doubled our production lines. We've made huge growth in our staff. And then, we run 24 hours, 5 days a week.
And two industry leaders, both in Tennessee, have finished or announced multi-million-dollar expansions in just the last few weeks. Blocker says that's great for the industry as a whole, but he worries that as vinyl becomes more mass-produced, the quality of the records themselves could suffer.
The hard part about a vinyl record, they are uniquely made one at a time. They're wildly different from one another.
So this is what it looks like before you make a record. It's about 300 degrees.
That finicky operation is on display at the Burlington record plant, where owner Justin Crowther shows me a glob of hot PVC about the size of a hockey puck. One of his employees places it on a paper label in between two circular metal plates. They come together, and a minute or so later, out pops an LP. At this shop, all of this is done manually, Crowther says.
It's constant work to just keep all eyes and ears on each parameter. It's a very difficult process.
But it's a process he intends to stick with. Even as more mainstream acts and money pour into the vinyl business, Crowther wants to keep his focus on smaller labels and local artists, the kind of work that brought vinyl back in the first place. In Burlington, Vermont, I'm Henry Epp for Marketplace.
This final note on the way out today, just because he's in the news, we had JP Morgan CEO Jamie Dimon on the program 5 years ago, and we talked about a lot of stuff, including how it came to be that he was the last big bank CEO standing after Bear Stearns and Lehman and all the rest.
What happened with Lehman was a disorderly unwind where assets were thrown, people couldn't get their cash, markets were going to collapse because they had to sell assets. So that was all fixed. So the capital, liquidity, the banking system is stronger. But the way you should look at risk is, and I always look at all the possible fat tails. So one of the reasons that JP Morgan does well, I don't just guess what the future is. I say, what is the worst it could possibly be, and can we handle it? And to me, handling it means I can still serve my client. It does not mean I have to run in panic. So you didn't see us ever run in panic. We saved a lot of companies in this crisis and did a lot of things to help facilitate orderly markets, et cetera. But you should always be asking that question. Where's the next problem coming from? It will be different from the last problem. There are always issues away from banks that can cause banks problems.
Where is the next problem coming from? Jamie Dimon at JP Morgan Chase on this program 5 years ago.
Marketplace is supported by Equities End Securities LLC. With Equities End funds, accredited investors can invest in the private companies shaping the future before they go public at equitiesend.com/radio. And by Viking, exploring the world in comfort. Viking offers a small ship experience with cultural enrichment and destination-focused dining. More at Viking.com. And by Alteryx. Alteryx enables anyone to make better data-driven decisions and believes in the power of analytics for all. Learn more at alteryx.com.
All right, we got to go. But first, your moment of economic context. I think it was Sudeep Reddy who said a couple of Fridays ago that at some point, the markets are going to start paying attention to the debt limit fight. Might I humbly suggest that today would be a good day for that? Both the Treasury Department and the Congressional Budget Office said late this afternoon, which is to say after the close on Wall Street, that the X date, that is the actual date when the Treasury Department's extraordinary measures might finally be exhausted, that could be in early June, June 1 perhaps, which is, just checking here. Yes, it is a mere 31 days from right now. Our daily production team is Libby Burdett, Andy Corbin, Richard Cunningham, Nicholas Guion, Maria Hollenhorst, Sarah Leeson, and Sean McHenry. I'm Kai Ryssdal. We'll see you tomorrow. This is APM.
WNYC is supported by